Hey everyone! Tonight we're taking a step into a darker chapter of history, a time filled with disease, harsh punishment, and whatever passed for food back then. We're peeling back the curtain on daily life during the Middle Ages. Forget everything Hollywood told you about knights, castles, and noble quests. Truth is, most of us wouldn't last 24 hours. Before we dive in, hit like and subscribe if you genuinely enjoy this kind of content. Drop a comment with your location and what time it is there. It's always cool to see where you're watching from. Okay, turn down the lights, maybe turn on a fan for a little ambient hum, and let's ease into tonight's historical deep dive. You've just woken up. In the year 1325, good news. You're alive, bad news, so are the fleas. You're lying on a straw mattress that's half decayed and infested with insects. It smells like a barn floor, probably because it used to be one. No memory foam, no pillows, and certainly no luxury sheets. Just a thick wool blanket that hasn't been cleaned since last winter, now heavy with dirt and who knows what else. You awaken to the sound of distant church bells. That's your medieval alarm clock. No snooze button, and somehow even more unforgiving. Your home is a small, single-room wooden shack with no windows. The open-concept floor plan includes your entire family, a few animals, and a rotating cast of household pests all crammed together. The smell. Imagine a mix of stale ale, unwashed bodies, goats, and a mysterious funk you hope isn't mold. But deep down you know it is. There are no air fresheners or scented candles. Even if they existed, they'd probably melt right into the dirt. Floor. You try to stretch but immediately regret it. It's freezing, and your joints are already aching. At 22, you're considered middle-aged by medieval standards. Your back sounds like an old wooden door, and your knees crunch like someone shaking a sack of rocks. Getting out of bed is a gamble. The floor is either soaked from rain that leaked through your thatched roof or crusty thanks to your neighbor's chicken leaving a surprise. Either way, your bare feet are now part of nature's grand experiment. Privacy? That doesn't exist. You wake up next to your entire family and maybe a cousin who just never left. No bedrooms, no curtains, just shared space, shared smells, and shared discomfort. Welcome to your medieval morning. You are never truly alone, not with parasites, rodents, and 8 other people living on top of you. And this is only how your day starts. You've managed to crawl out of your itchy hay heap. Good for you. Now nature calls, and it's not whispering, it's screaming. This is where you start missing your bathroom. There's no toilet, no seat, no paper, no flush, not even a plunger, silently judging you from the corner. In the 14th century, going to the bathroom is an adventure, a group experience, and often a bit of a public spectacle. If you're a peasant, your bathroom is likely a wooden bucket behind the house. And it's already filled because Uncle Stan had a bad night after eating rotten turnips. The stench is otherworldly. You do what you must, and then toss the contents into the street. Yes, the street. Supposedly, you're supposed to shout, "Gardez l'eau," an old French warning meaning watch out for water before dumping it. Not that anyone reacts quickly enough. Medieval town streets are open sewage channels, flowing with human waste, animal droppings, and unidentifiable sludge you don't want to investigate. If you're lucky enough to live in a town With public latrines, then great. You'll get to sit elbow to elbow with strangers in a poorly ventilated outhouse. No doors, no privacy, no mercy. You might chat, but try not to breathe too deeply. Toilet paper, forget it. People wipe with straw, rags, moss, leaves, or if they're feeling fancy, a bit of wool. Sometimes nothing at all. Which might explain why handshakes weren't exactly popular, and if you think castles had better conditions, kind of. A castle toilet might be a simple hole in the wall, leading straight to the moat below. Convenient. Unless attackers decide to sneak in through that same hole. Long story short, whether you're a peasant or a noble, medieval bathroom time is humiliating, cold, unsanitary, and potentially dangerous. One slip on a wet path, and you're face first. In humanity's worst leftovers, and you still haven't brushed your teeth. But we'll get to that. You've survived the medieval toilet ordeal. Congratulations. Surely you've earned a decent breakfast now. Sorry, this is medieval Europe. Nothing is pleasant here. Breakfast, if it even qualifies, is grim. There's no eggs Benedict, no hot coffee, and definitely no avocado toast. You sit by a low fire or squat next to it, and are handed a wooden bowl of something that looks like it came from under a barn door. Meet your daily ration. Pottage. Pottage is a thick, mushy stew made from whatever's lying around, grains, root vegetables, and maybe a few beans if you're lucky. It's been bubbling in the same pot for days, sometimes weeks, and new ingredients are simply thrown in on top of the old. It's less of a meal and more of an ongoing experiment in edibility. Next to it, you get a hunk of bread so solid it could double as a weapon. It's made from coarse barley or rye, often bulked up with fillers like sawdust or acorn flour because wheat is for rich people. Cutting it isn't an option. You more or less bargain with it. Want something to drink? Not orange juice, not tea, not even water. You're drinking beer, and yes, it's 6 a.m. Why? Because the water is a health hazard, full of parasites and mystery floaters. Weak ale, low in alcohol but boiled during. Brewing is actually the safer choice. Even children drink it. No one's thrilled, but at least it doesn't kill you on the spot. Thinking about meat or cheese? Keep dreaming. That's for special religious holidays, or when your landlord is feeling uncharacteristically generous. Most peasants eat meat just a few times a year. Fresh fruit only when it's in season and hasn't already turned into wine. As for spices, don't even think about it. A pinch of pepper costs more than your monthly rent. The salt is so valuable, it's often locked away. So instead, you nibble your gritty bread, sip your sad medieval beer, and try to forget about the rat that probably licked your pottage during the night. This meal doesn't fuel you. It simply happens to you. Now it's time to get dressed. Getting dressed in the Middle Ages is not about fashion. You own exactly one outfit. One. A single rough wool tunic or linen shift you've worn every day for months, maybe years. Seasonal wardrobes are not a thing. You wear it until it falls apart or fuses permanently with your skin. Underwear? Optional. If you're lucky, you have a linen under-tunic. If not, it's full medieval commando, itchy wool directly against your flesh. And your clothes. No washing machine, no detergent, no dry cleaning. They're stained stiff and smell like compost soaked in goat sweat. Even if you wanted to wash them, you'd need to haul water from a stream or well, heat it over a fire, scrub the garments with ashes or lye, then hang them in the rare sunshine, which might show up 3 days a year. Shoes? Maybe. If you're fortunate, you own some crude leather shoes with all the arch support of a soggy biscuit. Most peasants go barefoot, across mud, manure, sharp stones, and whatever filth nature or your neighbor has contributed to the landscape. This all adds up to one thing. Your skin hates you. You itch constantly. Fleas, lice, and bedbugs live on you like tenants that stopped paying rent centuries ago. Everyone has them, from lords to monks to children. No one is immune. You'll be chatting with the priest while digging into your armpit with a wooden spoon. No one will bat an eye. Your scalp is a battlefield of insect bites. If a rash shows up, tough luck. There's no ointment, no doctor, no clue. It might be scabies. It might be the start of something worse. Either way, you're stuck with it for the next 6 months, or however long it takes for it to either fade or kill you. Now that you're clothed in misery and layered in discomfort, it's time to put on your best face for the world. Too bad your teeth look like a haunted graveyard. Now that you're dressed in your scratchy wool and infested undergarments, it's time to flash that morning smile. Except you don't. Because in the Middle Ages, smiling is hazardous, not emotionally, but dentally. There's no toothbrush, no toothpaste, no floss, no mouthwash. The idea of oral hygiene is about as popular as showering, which is to say, not very. Some folks chew on sticks, others rinse with vinegar or cheap wine, but mostly your teeth are on their own. And they're not doing great. By your mid-20s, your smile probably looks like it belongs in a horror museum. Cavities are rampant. Gums are swollen. Your teeth, discolored, decayed, and loose. Sugar, still rare, is showing up more among the wealthy, mostly in tiny desserts. That means nobles get to rot their teeth faster. Peasants take the slow route, grinding them down with gritty bread, rock-hard crusts, and decades of chewing on whatever's available. Toothaches, get used to them. They're as common as dirt and about as inescapable. The pain is constant, dull and pounding, the kind that makes you consider praying, drinking, or doing something drastic, like yanking the tooth out yourself. No, that's not a joke. That's the treatment. Dentists don't really exist, but barber surgeons do. The same guy who trims your hair might also be the one pulling your molars out by firelight with an iron hook. No anesthesia, no antiseptic, just hope and agony. If an infection sets in, say hello to a high fever and possibly sepsis, which can kill you. Yes, you read that right. A toothache could be a death sentence in the 1300s. Romance? Good luck. Everyone has bad breath. Hygiene is non-existent. If you're looking to impress someone, it's not with your smile. It's with your goats, your land, or how well you survive the winter. So now your teeth hurt. Time to head outside and get to work. And here's a spoiler. It's not going to get better. Let's talk about your job. Except it's not really a job. It's an ongoing battle between your body and the earth is winning. If you're like 90% of the population, you're a peasant. That means you work land that doesn't belong to you. It belongs to a lord who might not even know your name, but will certainly know if you miss your quota. Your day starts at sunrise and ends when the light disappears. Tools: a splintered wooden hoe, a dull sickle, and whatever bones you haven't broken yet. Days off. Technically Sunday, but that only counts if you're not weeding, harvesting, nursing an infection, or fighting off bandits. There's no lunch break, no sick days. No one asks how you're feeling. You're here to labor until you die or get replaced. Field work is excruciating. You plow soil with your hands or with oxen. If your community is wealthy enough to own one, you dig trenches, plant seeds, haul water, and bend over for hours until your back folds like a collapsed tent. And if you're a woman, you do all that. Plus raise children, cook, fetch water, tend livestock, spin wool, and pretend. Your husband's lice infestation isn't migrating onto you during the night. Children: no childhood. By age 5, they're helping in the fields. No school, no toys. Just a wooden rake and a dream of someday dying from something other than dysentery. And if you're not a farmer, maybe you're a blacksmith, a tanner, or a cooper, in which case, congratulations. You spend your days around open flames, toxic chemicals, and animal entrails, in sheds with no ventilation. Wages? Barely enough. To survive. Benefits? Occasionally not bleeding. Get sick. Tough. Drink warm beer and get back to work. If you stop working, you don't eat. And if you don't eat, well, someone else will gladly take your place. That's medieval job security. You're not building a career. You're surviving a slow, muddy endurance test. Let's talk about the medieval climate, or rather, the complete lack of protection from it. Winter. The season of misery. Winter in the Middle Ages isn't charming. It's punishment. There's no insulation, no heating system, no weatherproofing. Just drafty wooden walls with gaps big enough to throw a chicken through. Your windows, they don't have glass. Just cloth, maybe oiled parchment if you're lucky. You huddle by a fireplace. More for morale than actual warmth. But wood is expensive, and in many places, collecting it from the forest is illegal. Yes, you can be executed for picking up the wrong stick from the wrong patch of land. So you wrap yourself in the same damp wool tunic you've worn all year and curl up near the embers. When you wake, your nose is frozen and your feet are still. Damp from yesterday, your fingers are too stiff to hold a spoon. Frostbite isn't diagnosed. It's just called bad luck. Summer. Now, with extra suffering. Think summer is an improvement. Guess again. Your house becomes a clay oven. No fans, no airflow, and no deodorant. You sweat through your layers, but you can't strip them off. Showing too much skin is frowned upon and invites judgment, sunburn, and bugs. Flies swarm your face. Mosquitoes buzz in your ears while you try to sleep, assuming the neighbor's arguing or the crying baby doesn't keep you awake. Out in the fields, the sun beats down. No sunscreen, no wide-brim hat, unless you've made one from straw, like a desperate scarecrow. Heat stroke? That's just called having a bad turn. So whether it's winter or summer, the rules stay the same. Your clothes still itch. Your food is still dreadful. Your work never stops. Welcome to medieval climate control, a system in which you suffer year-round. Water, a dangerous necessity. You're thirsty, you want to freshen up, maybe rinse your face. Too bad. Water in the Middle Ages is not your friend. It's out to kill you. Sure, that nearby stream looks clear and sparkling. Picturesque, right? But up the hill, someone probably dumped their waste into it. Or a dead pig is decomposing in the shallows. Medieval water is teeming with parasites, bacteria, and microscopic villains. That's why everyone drinks beer, even children. Not to party, but to survive. Brewing it involves boiling the water, which makes it safer than whatever's flowing through the town's trenches. The wealthy drink wine, and if they're bold, start sipping it before noon. But regular water? That's a gamble. What about bathing? In theory, yes. In practice, absolutely not. At the time, people believed that bathing opened your pores and let illness in. So being filthy was considered protective. The grime on your skin? A medieval hazmat suit. Public bathhouses did exist, but they became centers of gossip, scandal, and eventually sexual activity. That made them a problem for the church, which promptly shut many down. And if you do want to bathe, haul water from a well, heat it over a fire, fill a leaky wooden tub. Hope no one else used the water before you. Rainwater gets collected in barrels, which are perfect breeding grounds for bugs, bird poop, and floating green moss. So to recap, drinking water, dangerous. Bathing water, scarce. Clean water, a myth. You either take your chances or remain a sticky medieval soup of sweat, grime, and regret. Medieval medicine, where suffering was the cure. You've pushed through bad food, foul weather, and physical agony. Now you're sick. Too bad you live in the Middle Ages, where medicine is just creative torture with a religious twist. Diagnosis. Your flu is a moral failure. Got a fever, a rash, a broken limb? The explanation is simple. Your humors are out of balance. Medieval medicine revolves around 4 bodily fluids: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, black bile. The idea: illness happens. When one of these is out of whack, your health is like a soup, and something spoiled the broth. Treatment: let's bleed you out. Too much blood? Easy fix: drain it. Enter bloodletting, where they slice your veins or slap on leeches to balance your system. Yes, this is the go-to solution for everything from headaches to heartbreak. And who's doing this? Often your barber. You know, the guy who trims your hair also handles amateur surgery. 2-for-1 trauma. Feeling anxious? That's probably too much black bile. The cure? Laxatives, herbal purges, or maybe just quiet prayers and being ignored by your family while they prepare your funeral. Surgery, pure nightmare. Fuel, break a bone, get a nasty gash. There's no anesthesia unless you count passing out from sheer pain. Surgery is performed with blunt knives, rusty saws, and hands that were just in a pile of pig guts. Tools are heated over a fire, not for sterilization, but because it looks dramatic. Germ theory doesn't exist. Nobody knows about bacteria. Disease is thought to come from bad air, or, more likely, God being disappointed in you. Have a stomach ache? Must be because of your sinful thoughts. Hope you like vomiting while confessing your sins to a priest, and your neighbors dig your grave just in case. Recovery, or the other option. If you somehow get better, everyone assumes it's divine mercy. The priest claims credit. The doctor goes back to bloodletting. The leech gets a promotion. In the Middle Ages, medicine isn't about healing. It's about surviving the treatment. Evening, a meal that might kill you. It's evening, you've limped home, your stomach growling, you dream of a hot, hearty meal. Reality. Your dinner might be plotting your death. Food storage, not a thing. No refrigeration, no preservatives, just salt, smoke, and prayer. Your meat, if you're lucky enough to have any, has been hanging for days, maybe weeks. It's coated in flies and marinated in brine that's sketchier than the town drunk. Bread is your main staple, but even that betrays you. During lean seasons, it's stretched with bark, clay, or sawdust. And then there's ergot, a fungus that grows on rye and causes seizures, hallucinations, and death. Basically medieval LSD mixed with food poisoning, vegetables, only if in season, which means a lot of turnips. Boiled, mashed, floating in stew. If you dream of turnips, you're normal. If you don't, you're probably starving. Fruit is rare and spoils fast. Sugar, a rich man's fantasy. Spices, might as well ask for a golden goose. Flavor comes from onions and despair. And dairy, a gamble. Milk spoils in hours. Cheese and butter might survive longer, but they're bacteria bombs. People eat them anyway because the alternative is chewing on their shoes. Hunting your own food? Illegal. Game animals belong to the Lord. Caught poaching? You could be fined, jailed, or executed, that's right. Your dinner could literally get you hanged. So you slurp down your gritty, questionable stew, sit by the fire, and pray it doesn't turn on you. Because in the Middle Ages, food doesn't comfort, it tests you. Faith and fear, religion as a way of life and death. You've barely survived another day of cold stew and back-breaking labor. You'd think the suffering would ease now, but nope. It's time for your spiritual obligations. Because in medieval Europe, religion doesn't just influence life, it owns it. The church isn't just where you pray, it controls your calendar, your education, if you're literate, your laws, your marriage, birth, and burial. It's your spiritual landlord. And you're always behind on rent. A life scheduled by bells and sins. Every day is marked by church bells, morning, noon, night. Not because people can't tell time, but because missing prayer is a sin. Forgot to bow? Sin. Ate meat on a Friday. Sin. Had a weird dream about your neighbor's spouse. Sin, and probably a double one. Hell isn't vague fire and brimstone. It's vividly illustrated by priests, rivers of fire, eternal screaming, demons with pitchforks. It's basically your worst nightmare, narrated weekly. No Bible for you. You can't read the Bible yourself. It's in Latin, a language reserved for monks and nobles. You depend entirely on the priest to explain what God wants from you. So if the crops fail, guess what? You didn't pray hard. Enough. Better repent faster. Tithes, giving 1/10 of what you earn, aren't optional. Grow wheat, give wheat. Raise chickens. Fork over eggs. Own nothing? then you're spiritually and financially bankrupt. Holy days that aren't holidays. Yes, there are a lot of religious feast days, but don't imagine dancing or cake. They're packed with fasting, confessing, and avoiding joy. Celebrating too much might get you labeled a sinner, or worse, a heretic. Question the church? Burned. Practice folk healing? Drowned as a witch. Say something snarky about a saint? Flogged or publicly humiliated. So you attend Mass. You kneel, you chant. You hope the priest likes you because he decides if you get to heaven or not. God may be merciful, but the church, not so much. Medieval justice, torture with a public audience. If you thought daily life was brutal, wait until you get caught doing something wrong, or just accused of it. Justice in the Middle Ages is like street theater with stakes. Literally. Crime. And unusual punishment: steal a loaf of bread. You could lose a hand. Caught gossiping too much? Meet the scold's bridle. A metal mask clamped on your head with a bar shoved into your mouth. Lie in public? Your tongue might get pierced. Justice isn't about fairness. It's about spectacle. Painful, humiliating spectacle. Trial by ordeal, the ultimate lose-lose, accused of something serious. Here's how you prove innocence. Boiling water test. Stick your hand in, grab a rock. If it heals without infection, you're innocent. Dunking test. Thrown into a river. Sink, you're innocent, but probably dead. Float, guilty. That's it, you survived the test. Miracle. You don't? You were guilty after all. Everyone wins. Except you. If sentenced to death, the whole town shows up. Executions are community entertainment. Hangings, beheadings, burnings. Bring the kids. Domestic abuse. Completely accepted. Husbands are expected to correct their wives and children, often with fists. Street fights are daily events. You could get beat up for looking at a noble the wrong way. And then there's war, always simmering. Local feuds, religious crusades, border squabbles. There's always someone ready to stab someone else over land, pride, or boredom. Violence isn't a breakdown, it's the system. You live with the knowledge that life is cheap, justice is rigged, and your neighbors might bash your head in over a spilled ale, so keep your head down, walk fast, trust no one carrying a stick. The end game, dying young and often. You've trudged through lice, labor, lousy stew, and leeches. Now let's talk about how it all ends. Because in the Middle Ages, death comes early, often, and in many creatively awful forms. If you're alive past 40, you're practically a celebrity. People call you the old one, yet not affectionately, but with genuine shock. The numbers are grim. Average life expectancy? Around 30 to 40 years. But don't let that fool you. It's mostly because half of all children die before age 5. That's not a figure of speech. That's reality. A cold winter, bad harvest, or minor infection could wipe out a village. There are no vaccines, no antibiotics, and almost no chance. If you survive childhood, congrats. Now your real suffering begins. By age 25, your joints sound like they're filled with gravel. You're missing teeth, maybe a toe, and almost certainly your will to live. For women, childbirth is a deadly gamble. No doctors, no sterile equipment, no pain relief. You labor on a straw-stuffed cot while someone holds your hand and prays you don't bleed to death. For men, death comes from farming accidents, untreated wounds, drunken brawls, or getting conscripted into a crusade because some noble is bored and wants land. Walking to the market could turn fatal if you run into a bandit, a tax collector, or a horse in a bad mood. Then there's plague. When it hits, it doesn't trickle. It erupts. Entire towns become graveyards. Famine often follows, thinning out survivors with cold efficiency. Eat bad rye and get poisoned by ergot? You'll spend your final hours hallucinating, convulsing, and screaming at your ceiling. Good times. Funerals, the bare minimum. If you're lucky, someone digs a hole and mumbles a few words. No embalming, no polished casket, just a shallow pit and the hope that there's still space in the churchyard. You don't retire. You just stop showing up. Final thoughts. No, you don't want to be a knight. Still think the Middle Ages sound romantic. Let's recap. You've woken up covered in grime, dumped waste in the street, eaten sour pottage, worked until your spine begged for mercy, scratched through your flea-infested tunic, nearly died from drinking water, and sidestepped public torture for owning a squirrel. Forget the fantasy of knights and noble quests. That's storybook nonsense. In reality, life is rigged by hierarchy. Castles are cold, damp, and full of fleas. Nobles die from infected paper cuts. Peasants die from literally everything else. Even the rich can't escape. Sure, they have fur cloaks and wine goblets, but they're also arranged into loveless marriages and hunted during political feuds. The simple life, it's not peaceful, it's relentless. Everything hurts, everything takes longer. Even chewing is a health risk. You live, suffer, work, and die within 10 miles of where you were born. No escape, no upgrades, no upward mobility. But here's the twist. Despite it all, people still sang, laughed, told stories, and found ways to love. Not because life was easy, but because humans are stubborn. Even in darkness, they lit candles. So tonight, when you curl up in your warm bed under clean sheets, with indoor plumbing and Tylenol within arm's reach, whisper a quiet thank you to the modern world and to the ancestors who fought rats, plague, and feudalism so you wouldn't have to. Catherine the Great, from obscure princess to Russian empress. Before she was one of the most powerful rulers in history, Catherine the Great was simply Sophie, a minor princess with a sharp mind and big ambitions. Born in 1729 as Sophie Friederike August von Anhalt-Zerbst, she came from a small, fairly unremarkable German noble family. Her homeland offered little in the way of power or promise. But Sophie, she had something far more valuable: intellect, charisma, and an unshakable determination to become more than what she was born into. Early life. A cold home and a quick mind. Sophie's childhood was strict, if not exactly loving. Her mother, Johanna, was emotionally distant and obsessed with social advancement. Her father, a Prussian military officer, was stern and removed. From a young age, Sophie learned how to read a room before speaking. She devoured books, mastered languages, and perfected the art of smiling while listening. She was being raised to be useful, but she was quietly preparing to be influential. The call to Russia. When Empress Elizabeth of Russia began looking for a suitable bride for her nephew and heir, Grand Duke Peter, she wanted someone foreign, young and, ideally, controllable. Peter was of German descent himself, and the Empress thought a fellow outsider would be easier to manage. Sophie was a perfect match. Noble blood, modest personality, and just the right amount of pliability. At 14, she was summoned to Russia. She arrived in St. Petersburg in 1744, shivering in thin German clothes, accompanied by her scheming mother and her own diplomatic smile. But while her mother saw a golden opportunity, Sophie had other plans. Becoming Catherine. To be accepted by Russian society, Sophie had to convert to Orthodox Christianity. She did, enthusiastically. She was baptized publicly, took on a new Russian name, and was reborn as Catherine Alexeyevna. This wasn't just about religion. It was about burning the bridge back home. She was now Russian in name, spirit, and loyalty. There was no going back. At this point, few people realized that this quiet foreign teenager had just taken her first step toward absolute power. The marriage, a crown that felt like chains. Catherine's marriage to Grand Duke Peter was never a love story. It was a political arrangement that quickly turned into a prison. Peter, the heir to the Russian throne, wasn't the romantic prince of fairy tales. He was emotionally stunted, immature, and obsessed with toy soldiers. He preferred playing dress-up in military uniforms to spending time with his wife, or learning how to govern. Some accounts say he didn't consummate the marriage for years. Catherine, meanwhile, was isolated in a hostile court, watched constantly, and warned to stay quiet and obedient. But she wasn't just waiting, she was studying. A tale of two futures. While Peter resented the Russian court and clung to his Prussian roots, Catherine embraced her new home with calculated determination. She learned Russian fluently, studied the nation's history, memorized Orthodox rituals, and practiced the politics of silence. In public, she was polite, devout, and graceful. In private, she was building alliances. She made friends among military officers. She charmed intellectuals and noble families. She observed which ministers whispered behind closed doors and which priests held real influence, all while Peter sulked, alienated allies, and made himself a national embarrassment. The court, a snake pit in silk robes. Life in the Russian imperial court was dangerous, a world of gossip, betrayal, and backstabbing where fortunes were made or ruined overnight. Catherine's every letter was read, every conversation monitored, and even her servants reported on her. She couldn't trust her husband, her mother, who was whispering to foreign courts, or her attendants, but she didn't complain. She adapted. She began reading the philosophers of the Enlightenment, Voltaire, Montesquieu, Diderot, thinkers who believed in reason, progress and the idea that rulers should serve the people. Catherine didn't just dream of surviving Russia. She began crafting a vision of how she would one day lead it. There was only one problem. Peter was in the way. The coup, how Catherine took the Russian throne. By 1762, Catherine had waited nearly 2 decades, observing, learning, and quietly building power in the shadows. Then her moment arrived. Empress Elizabeth died. Her husband, now Peter III, finally ascended the throne and immediately began self-destructing. Peter's brief and disastrous reign. In just a few months, Peter managed to alienate nearly everyone. He offended the church. He insulted the nobility. He praised Prussia, a longtime enemy of Russia. He openly talked about divorcing Catherine to marry his mistress. Even the army, full of powerful generals, began murmuring rebellion. Peter had no allies. Catherine, on the other hand, had many. She had spent years building relationships with military leaders, including one of her lovers, Grigory Orlov, and his influential brothers. They were ready. The takeover, bold, bloodless, and brilliant, in July 1762, while Peter was away at his palace, Catherine made her move. She rode through the streets of St. Petersburg, dressed in full military regalia, flanked by soldiers who proclaimed her Empress of Russia. The public supported her. The army pledged loyalty. The clergy blessed the coup. Peter, caught completely off guard and surrounded by enemies, surrendered without a fight. Days later, he was found dead. Officially, it was from hemorrhoidal colic. Unofficially, he was murdered, likely with Catherine's knowledge, though she never admitted it. A crown taken, not given. And just like that, Catherine was Empress Catherine II, not by birth, not by inheritance, but by strategy, courage, and raw political genius. She was a foreigner, a woman, and a usurper. Yet she had pulled off a seamless coup with almost no bloodshed. But claiming the crown was just the beginning. Now she had to keep it and prove that she wasn't just a clever conspirator, but a ruler worthy of shaping an empire. The philosopher Empress, reforming an empire. Catherine didn't seize the throne to relax in luxury. She had a mission: to remake Russia into a stronger, smarter, and more modern empire. She was no passive monarch. From day one, she worked tirelessly, writing state documents, reading reports, and engaging with thinkers from across Europe. Where Peter the Great had forced Russia to look westward, Catherine wanted to pull Russia into the future. A student of the Enlightenment, Catherine adored the ideas of Enlightenment philosophers. She read Voltaire, Diderot, Montesquieu, and wrote to them directly. With Voltaire, she exchanged letters for over 15 years, part political flirtation, part philosophical debate. She even bought Diderot's library to support him financially and invited him to Russia. Catherine believed in education, legal reform, science, reason, over superstition, and the idea that rulers should serve their people even while holding absolute power. She wasn't just quoting philosophers, she was applying their ideas. Rewriting the rules. In 1767, Catherine launched her boldest project yet, a complete overhaul of Russia's legal system. She formed the Legislative Commission. Hundreds of delegates from across the empire gathered to help modernize the laws. She wrote the nakaz, or instruction, a massive legal document filled with progressive ideas: equality before the law, opposition to torture, and a call for rulers to work for the good of the people. For 18th century Russia, this was radical. But theory meets reality. Russia wasn't Paris. It was a massive, feudal, conservative land ruled by powerful nobles who liked their peasants poor, loyal, and stuck. Catherine needed those nobles to stay in power. So while she banned certain forms of torture and promoted secular schools, she also strengthened the aristocracy's grip on the peasantry, especially after uprisings started to stir. This was Catherine's balancing act. In public, a philosopher queen quoting Enlightenment ideals. In private, a shrewd empress holding an empire together with strategic compromise. She wasn't trying to copy Western Europe. She wanted to modernize Russia on her own terms, carefully and with authority. The empire builder, Catherine's expansion of Russia. Catherine the Great didn't just want to reform Russia from within. She wanted to expand it outward, turning it into a continental power that demanded respect, fear, and influence. Where Peter the Great had opened a window to the west, Catherine kicked down the walls. Warfare and strategy, more than just conquest. Catherine fought wars not just to grab land, but to shift the balance of power in Europe. One of her most significant campaigns was against the Ottoman Empire, which dominated parts of Eastern Europe and the Black Sea. These wars, fought throughout the 1760s and 1770s, were about more than land. They were about religion, prestige, and trade. Catherine positioned herself as a protector of Orthodox Christians living under Muslim rule. But she also wanted something every Russian ruler had dreamed of: access to warm water ports on the Black Sea. Under the command of generals like Alexander Suvorov and her trusted ally and lover, Grigory Potemkin, Russian forces captured Crimea and large portions of what is now southern Ukraine. The victories were not only military triumphs, they were symbolic power moves, signaling that Russia was no longer a second-rate kingdom. It was becoming a European superpower, the carving up of Poland. Catherine also turned her gaze west. In a series of diplomatic backroom deals, she joined Austria and Prussia in dividing up the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. Through three partitions, 1772, 1793, 1795, Poland was slowly erased from the map, and Russia absorbed massive new territories. It wasn't just about geography. With each land grab, Catherine gained millions of new subjects, expanded trade, and projected Russian influence deep into Europe. Colonization and cultural control. Catherine didn't stop at war. She expanded her empire through ideas and infrastructure. She founded new cities, built roads and ports, invited foreign settlers, particularly Germans, to farm Russian land. encouraged modernization in the newly annexed regions. She read reports, issued orders, and shaped policy personally. This wasn't a figurehead ruler. Catherine was hands-on, running an empire with military discipline and intellectual ambition. A controversial legacy. Critics called her imperialistic. Some accused her of warmongering. But to Catherine, this was destiny. She believed a great ruler was judged not just by ideas, but by how far their borders stretched. She didn't just want to rule Russia. She wanted to remake it into a vast, civilized and indomitable empire, one that bore her signature from its southern shores to its northern forests. The personal is political. Catherine's private life and public reputation. Behind the throne, beyond the policy papers and battlefield maps, Catherine the Great lived a rich and often controversial private life, one that was watched, whispered about, and endlessly exaggerated. She wasn't just a ruler, she was a woman in power in a man's world, and that made her a target for gossip, myth, and envy. Her lovers, more than romance. Catherine had a long line of lovers, as many as a dozen serious ones and others rumoured, but these weren't careless affairs or reckless flings. They were calculated partnerships, often with men who could offer her loyalty, support, or valuable insight. Among the most famous were Grigory Orlov, a military hero who helped her seize power, Grigory Potemkin, a brilliant general and perhaps the only man she truly loved. A series of younger courtiers, often elevated to wealth and rank after their time with her. She didn't apologize for her relationships, and she never let them control her. If a lover became too ambitious, too foolish, or too dramatic, she replaced them, gracefully, and usually with a generous pension. To Catherine, romance was never just about desire. It was an extension of statecraft. Each relationship had a political dimension. Power, after all, was her ultimate partner. The scandal and the smears. Of course, a powerful woman who enjoyed both books and bed partners was too much for many of her male contemporaries, especially in the courts of Europe. So they turned to character assassination. After her death, she became the subject of outrageous rumors, including grotesque and false stories like the infamous horse myth that were meant to degrade her legacy and reduce her to ridicule. These tales were never rooted in truth. They were weapons used to undermine a female ruler who had succeeded beyond most men's wildest dreams. She wasn't immoral. She was unapologetic, and in her time that was far more threatening. She wrote her own narrative. Catherine was acutely aware of how history would judge her. That's why she wrote memoirs, commissioned portraits, and crafted an image of herself as both enlightened monarch and national mother. She painted herself not as a tyrant, but as Russia's guiding light, bringing civilization, order and reason to a land that had once been wild and disjointed. And despite the rumors, despite the resistance, her image endured. Because Catherine wasn't just trying to rule for her lifetime. She was shaping a legend that would survive long after her death. Final years. power until the end. Catherine ruled for 34 years, from 1762 until her death in 1796, one of the longest reigns of any female leader in history. She didn't slow down with age. In her 60s, she was still writing letters, passing reforms, managing wars, and reading Enlightenment philosophy by candlelight. She stayed sharp, focused, and fully in control. There was no retirement plan, no handing over power early. She was empress until the last breath, because she didn't trust anyone else to carry out her vision, especially her son, Paul. Her relationship with her son, cold and complicated. Catherine never warmed to Paul. She considered him emotionally unstable and politically dangerous. She had even considered skipping him entirely, naming her grandson Alexander as her successor instead. She spent years planning for a smooth transition, hoping to keep the progress she had made from unraveling. But fate had other plans. In November 1796, Catherine suffered a stroke and died suddenly at the age of 67. Paul immediately took the throne and began undoing much of what she had built. It was a tragic twist, but not the end of her influence, because Catherine had already done what few rulers ever manage. She reshaped a nation, rewrote its future, and left a legacy larger than any one successor could erase. The legacy, more than an empress. Catherine the Great is remembered as a reformer who brought Enlightenment ideals to one of Europe's most conservative kingdoms, a conqueror who expanded the Russian Empire across thousands of miles, a visionary who modernized governance, law, and education, a strategist who rose from foreign outsider to absolute ruler, a woman who defied every expectation, broke every rule, and ruled with confidence, complexity, and intellect. She wasn't perfect. No great leader is. She made compromises. She crushed rebellions. She strengthened the nobility at the expense of peasants, but she also lifted Russia into the modern world, placed it firmly on the European stage, and carved her name into the history of power. Even centuries later, Catherine remains a towering figure, not because she inherited greatness, but because she built it. From an obscure German princess to Empress of all Russia, Catherine the Great didn't just live through history, she made it. Frida Kahlo, The Art of Pain, the Power of Self. Before she became a global icon, Frida Kahlo was just a girl from Mexico with a rebellious spirit, a sharp tongue, and a life that would be shaped and shattered by pain. But from that pain, she built something extraordinary, a legacy of art, identity, and fierce self-expression. Early life, a girl born between worlds. Frida Kahlo was born in 1907 in Coyoacán, a quiet neighborhood in Mexico City, into a family that reflected her dual identity. Her father, a German immigrant, was a photographer. Her mother, deeply rooted in Mexican tradition, was religious and strict. Frida was fiercely intelligent, curious and defiant. She insisted she was born in 1910, the year of the Mexican Revolution, not to lie, but to align herself with a new Mexico, one being reborn through struggle and resistance. From the start, she knew life wasn't going to be gentle. The illness that changed everything. At 6 years old, Frida contracted polio, a disease that left one of her legs thinner and weaker than the other. She spent months in bed, isolated, watching the world from her window, but she didn't shrink. She fought back. She learned to walk again, joined in rough sports, and wore pants when girls didn't. Not to rebel, but because skirts slowed her down. Her illness made her different. She made that difference part of who she was. Dreams of medicine and a sudden detour. By her teens, Frida wasn't focused on art. She wanted to become a doctor. She studied hard and enrolled in the prestigious National Preparatory School. One of the few girls among hundreds of boys. She stood out not just because she was brilliant, but because she was bold. She smoked, swore, read Marx, joined student political clubs, and pulled pranks. She was already crafting the fierce, unfiltered version of herself the world would come to know. But in 1925, her life fractured, literally. While riding a bus through the city, a horrific accident occurred. The vehicle collided with a streetcar. Frida was impaled by a metal rod and suffered multiple broken bones, a shattered spine, and internal injuries so severe that most people would not have survived. She did, but she would never be the same. Outborn from pain. The mirror, the bed, the brush. After the accident, Frida Kahlo was trapped in her body. She spent months confined to her bed, encased in body casts and braces. Her spine was unstable, her leg shattered. Her dreams of becoming a doctor vanished in an instant. But even in agony, Frida found a way to fight and to create. With a mirror mounted above her bed and a custom easel rigged so she could paint lying down, Frida began to turn her pain into pictures. She had no formal art training, no teacher hovering over her shoulder, just a brush, her imagination, and a body that refused to forget. Painting herself because she knew herself best. Frida once said, "I paint myself because I am so often alone, and because I am the subject I know best." And that's what she did. Her earliest works were portraits and self-portraits, but not the soft, romantic kind. These were raw, unsparing images that showed her scars, her braces, her anguish, and her rage. She painted with vibrant colors and unsettling honesty. Her eyes stared back at the viewer, sometimes teary, sometimes defiant, always impossible to look away from. Each painting was a visual diary, a confession, and a challenge. Meeting Diego Rivera, love, art, and chaos. In 1928, Frida's life changed again. She met Diego Rivera, Mexico's most famous muralist, a man twice her age, twice her size, and as passionate about revolution as she was. He was wild, charismatic, and already a legend. She showed him her paintings, and he was stunned. He encouraged her to keep going, not because she painted like anyone else, but because she didn't. They became lovers, then husband and wife in 1929, and began one of the most tumultuous relationships in modern art history. Their marriage was a firestorm, passionate, political, and constantly in flux. They loved, betrayed, forgave, and fought, often all in the same week. They had affairs, sometimes with the same people, separated, divorced, then remarried. But through it all, they remained creative equals, two giants circling each other, inspiring and infuriating in equal measure. Becoming Frida, art, identity, and national pride. As her body continued to suffer, Frida Kahlo's voice as an artist grew louder, sharper, and more distinct. She was no longer just painting what she saw in the mirror. She was painting what she felt: betrayal, longing, anger, hope, and pride. Her canvases became battlegrounds where personal pain collided with cultural identity. Mexicanidad, a political and personal aesthetic. Frida embraced her roots, not just as a personal statement, but as a political one. She wore Tijuana dresses, adorned herself with pre-Columbian jewelry, and filled her home with indigenous art, crafts, and folk traditions. It wasn't a costume. It was resistance, a rejection of colonial ideals, European standards, and everything sterile and polite. She painted herself with monkeys, skeletons, bleeding hearts, and desert landscapes. Her body often appeared cracked open, pierced, or transforming into something surreal. Her work defied neat labels. It wasn't quite surrealism, though surrealists claimed her. It wasn't just folk art, though it pulsed with Mexican symbolism. And it wasn't simply autobiographical, though nearly every painting was drawn from her lived experience. It was uniquely, unmistakably Frida. Pain as a universal language. Frida endured a lifetime of surgeries, miscarriages, and chronic pain. Her spine was fragile, her leg deteriorated, and she often painted from a hospital bed. But instead of hiding her suffering, she illuminated it. In works like The Broken Column, Henry Ford Hospital, and Without Hope, she showed her body as a battlefield, pinned with nails, bleeding into soil, or lying abandoned under an indifferent sky. These weren't cries for pity, they were acts of defiance. She took private agony and made it public, not to shock, but to say, "This is real, this is human, this is me." Frida didn't sanitize her emotions. She wielded them like weapons, layered in color, shadow, and symbolism. The world begins to notice. Though Frida was often seen as Diego Rivera's wife, her talent was impossible to ignore. By the late 1930s, her work was being shown in New York and Paris. Artists like Pablo Picasso and Marcel Duchamp were impressed, and a bit unsettled. She wasn't painting what was fashionable, she was painting what mattered. When asked if her work was surrealist, she replied simply, "I never painted dreams. I painted my own reality." And that reality was fierce, painful, and deeply beautiful. Final years, defying death and becoming immortal. As the 1940s came to a close, Frida Kahlo's health collapsed, but her spirit did not. Her spine was deteriorating. Her leg was eventually amputated. She endured more than 30 surgeries in her lifetime. Each one left her weaker physically, but sharper in her defiance. She wore elaborate corsets, not to hide her pain, but to transform it into art. She painted on them, turning braces into canvases. Her wheelchair became part of her creative space. Her bed became her studio. She was unbreakable even as her body broke. The art keeps coming. Despite constant pain, Frida continued to paint. Her last works were smaller, more intimate, and often filled with surreal images of death, decay, and longing, but also, surprisingly, with hope. One of her final paintings was a still life of ripe, juicy watermelons, inscribed with the words, "Viva la vida," long live life. It was not a surrender. It was a last laugh in the face of suffering. Political to the end, Frida remained a passionate communist throughout her life. She attended rallies, supported workers' rights, and was outspoken against American imperialism. In her final public appearance, just days before her death, she was wheeled into a protest against the CIA-backed coup in Guatemala. She was sick, in pain, barely able to speak, but she showed up. Her death, her legend. Frida Kahlo died on July 13, 1954, at the age of 47. Her death certificate said pulmonary embolism, but some believe it may have been suicide. No matter the cause, her final diary entry was haunting. "I hope the exit is joyful, and I hope never to return." But she didn't disappear. Not really. The afterlife of Frida Kahlo. For decades, she was overshadowed by Diego Rivera, remembered more as a curiosity than a titan of art. But then something happened. In the 1970s, feminist scholars rediscovered her. In the 1980s, her work was exhibited around the world. In the 1990s and 2000s, she became a cultural icon, her face appearing on T-shirts, murals, makeup lines, and protest signs. Today, Frida Kahlo is more than a painter. She's a symbol of survival in the face of chronic pain, of unapologetic self-expression, of cultural pride, feminism and rebellion, of turning brokenness into beauty. She didn't ask for fame. She asked for truth, and she painted it. In the end, Frida Kahlo didn't just leave behind paintings. She left behind a voice, one that still whispers, screams, and sings across generations.